That alone, verse number 98. We have not known anything here so far, having spoken of great happiness, even if intellect and such disappear, the reality of the self, without becoming disintegrated, will continue as knowledge. Commentary. The first stage of our life on earth alternates between a state of deep sleep and a dreamlike experience where the wakeful and the dream are not very distinct. The infant has no memory of an empirical world, so it sees for the first time various forms and images, and hears sounds for the first time as well. It does not immediately correlate the sounds it hears with any forms. So in its mind, things have no names, they are only like moving pictures. When the child closes its eyes, we do not know what it sees. Perhaps the memories of similar shadows are passing through its mind. More than the memory of what it saw or heard, it is more likely to be recalling its memory of touches. Certain areas of the child's body, when tickled, produce pleasure. Freud has elaborated on this. The child's dreams are likely to be of being fondled, kissed, caressed, tickled, and either sucking its mother's breast or passing urine or feces. It does the latter along with the dream. So each time the child goes into a beautiful reverie, you have to change its diaper. So the first phase is deep sleep, and from that the child wakes into a world where the dream and the wakeful are bracketed. It enjoys deep sleep unitively, while the enjoyment of the dream depends on the kind of impressions that come, either pleasurable or painful. After a time, the child enters into a more clear differentiation of the wakeful from the dream by repeatedly seeing the same people, such as its mother and father and other family members. It starts recognizing them. At a later stage, it even begins the exercise of coordinating names and forms. Slowly, the subject-object difference becomes more and more pronounced, until the wakeful stands out as a separate experience. Now the child has three distinct types of experience: deep sleep, dream, and wakeful. As there is a continuity in the wakeful, which does not occur in the dream, because of the same forms and people appearing again and again, the wakeful begins to gain a higher status as what is consistently true. Whatever experiences you have in the dream, when you wake up, they are all sublimated. They no longer have validity. What we experience in the wakeful likewise disappears in the dream. But we don't take that seriously, because we can pick up whatever happened before and continue with it in the next period of our wakeful life. So the wakeful begins to seem more true. This pattern of experiencing lasts to the very close of life. If someone has been having an enjoyable dream and then wakes up, they immediately devalue the joy experienced in the dream, saying, "Oh, it was only a dream." In the same way, when you wake up from wakeful life to a higher state of consciousness, despite all the adventures you underwent and all the great pleasures you had, the validity of wakeful life ceases. In this verse, Narayana Guru says, "You have not known anything so far." We are in verse 98, and he is saying we don't know anything yet. By saying we, he includes himself in this state of affairs. Until now, we have not known a thing properly. Why? Because we have been saying, "Oh, that was excellent, it was wonderful, superb." All these implied comparisons are there because you have never known your true state, in which there is no good and bad. There are no superlatives and nothing to compare anything to. It's just bliss through and through. Only if something has aspects could you say, in the morning it was like that, and after noon it became like that. There are no high and low tides in the joy of the self. It's always the same. So we have to confess this is something we have not known. St. John of the Cross knew the self. I have my genuine doubts about St. Teresa's experience because she spoke of the many gradations of ecstasy she found as she went from one chamber to another. But St. John never admits any kind of comparison. At the bottom of Mount Carmel, there is nothing, and at the summit also, there is nothing. All he could say was nothing, nothing, nothing. The nothing of which he speaks is the same as what the Buddha called nirvana. It is the burning out of all the possibilities of the phenomenal, which brings you to a pure state. It is even a mistake to say you have come to a pure state, which uses the comparative language of the transactional world. The state was always there. You never left it. Once a wandering monk came to the court of a great king and said he wanted to show him his psychic powers. The king said, "Okay, show me." As the courtiers watched the king, they saw his eyelids drooping. It looked as if he were taking a nap. The king saw himself going to a riverside to draw some water, and he found the river was in flood. On the other side, he saw a beautiful girl coming down with a pot to also fetch water. He felt a powerful longing for her. Suddenly she slipped and fell into the water. She was drowning. The king jumped into the river and caught her, dragging her with great difficulty to the other bank. He laid her on the shore unconscious, but after a bit she recovered and was very grateful to him. She said, "Now you have saved my life. You should meet my parents. They will be very happy." The girl took him to her place in the forest. All the family were hunters and gatherers, so they didn't come back until the end of the day. She built a fire, and he sat there while she made a meal for him of simple hunter's food. He forgot that he was a king and ate the food with great relish, even though by the rules of caste it was unclean, because she was so loving and so beautiful. That night her parents returned, and she told them how he had saved her life. They begged him to stay, and later urged him to marry her. He stayed, and he married her. They taught him their livelihood and how to speak like they did, and gradually he became a part of their community. Over the years, 6 children were born, and they were all very happy. Then, one year, there was a great drought and famine. The crops were all burning up, and the family could not find food to eat. In desperation, they decided to leave, and he carried the small children on his shoulders, while his wife and the others followed on foot. They walked and walked. On the way, one child died. With great grief, he buried her. They continued on their way, suffering severe pangs of hunger and thirst, until another child died. He buried that one, then another. Finally, he was left with only 2 children and his wife. Suddenly, a huge bushfire swept through the forest. He ran, but the fire engulfed his wife and children. He couldn't stop to help them. The fire was getting hotter and hotter. It was starting to burn him. He could feel himself starting to die, and then he woke up. He saw he was sitting in the court on his throne. The magician was gone. The king slowly shook his head and asked what happened. The chamberlain told him, "Your Highness, a mendicant came and said, he will show you some magic. Then we saw you sleeping." "How long did I sleep?" "Maybe 3 minutes." 3 minutes. I lived in the forest for 20 years. I had 6 children. So many things happened, and you say it was only 3 minutes. Nothing happened, but all those events took place. When the king woke up, they were all as nothing. Then the king said, "I cannot take this as a trick. It was so very real." He sent some people to go to the part of the country where he dreamed he had lived. They found a forest fire blazing and spoke to some hunters nearby. They told him there was a family that lived over here. A very unusual man married their daughter. They had 6 children, but they all went away when the big famine came. We heard that many of them died in the great fire. Then the king was really confused. This story comes from the Yoga Vasishta. Phenomenality comes as a series of such events, which are so convincing, and yet in the pure domain of spirit, nothing is really happening. The Guru says here that that kind of knowledge comes only when we wake up from the wakeful. It is easy to awaken from deep sleep, and it is easy to wake up from the dream state, but it is not so easy to wake from the wakeful. All spiritual pursuits are meant to bring about such an awakening. The word Buddha means the awakened one. He woke up from the wakeful world. We have just had 2 verses to get us to wake up. If you are still speaking of a wonderful joy you had yesterday at 3 o'clock, it shows you still have to wake up. A little while ago, a friend was speaking to me with great earnestness of a number of possibilities in his own personal life. He was absolutely sincere, very convinced of those possibilities. But after narrating an experience or describing a direction, he would always come to a crossroads where his mind was seized by a doubt. Is what I am saying real? He would wonder, and then an answer would come from his own mind. Maybe not. How quickly the truth of what he had been saying with such sincerity was denied. Then he would go on to another theme, which was equally fascinating, very interesting, quite reasonable, and thoroughly logical. He would come to another punctuation, and the question would arise, is this real? He himself says, maybe not, I don't know. Then the mind shifts and comes to yet another possibility. I am not finding fault. This is typical. There are recurring patterns in everyone's lives. Many people do not retrospect and examine all the significant aspects of their life in order to learn and grow. They just walk on. They are not confused only because they don't think about things, not because they have resolved them. But they are really no better than the person who retrospects and is confused. Such kind of a non-reflective way of life leads you to the most agonizing kind of experience. The bright moments of life bring you, for a while at least, satisfaction in what you are doing. The next moment, the whole thing appears to be futile, meaningless. Then comes a few bright moments, then doubt assails. The net result is living in a vicious circle. In Mahayana Buddhism, there are texts like the Lankavatara Sutra, the Prajnana Paramita Sutra, and the Diamond Sutra that deal with this problem. In them, everything is presented in the form of a mental modulation, which is then examined, questioned, and rejected. Paradoxically, this process of rejection does not bring them to a state of darkness or confusion, but to a state of heightened clarity. Realizing the emptiness or nothingness of the phenomenal world brings great clarity. But the phenomenal world persists, so they go on to examine the next occurrence that is also rejected, which brings them to the same confirmation once again. Vedantins have the same method as when Yajnavalkya resorts to the technique of negating everything, saying neti neti, not this, not this. When this is done intellectually, it brings absolute boredom. Sitting there and doing this as an intellectual process brings only darkness and frustration, because you are doing it in the wakeful, and so it doesn't lead you to wake up from the wakeful. The transactional verity is to be rejected, but not from within the transactional frame of reference. This is where we fail. Without becoming endowed with a higher consciousness, we fail. Nothing you do while remaining in the ordinary consciousness takes you one step further. This naturally leads us to the question, how do you become endowed with higher consciousness? There is no need for me to even mention that here, because no one is going to follow it. It's just a waste of time. You have to discipline yourself. Is there anyone who is willing to become a disciple? No one. Truly no one. Absolutely no one. And why is that? You have your small likes and dislikes, your little pleasures. If a compromise could be made to include your special preferences in the plan of the discipline, then you would be willing to have it. A good example is yoga. In America, if you go to a yoga teacher, the class begins with a posture. That means you have already violated the spirit of yoga. Why? Yoga does not begin with a posture. That is the third step of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Before that, there are two other steps, yama and niyama. Yama means 5 kinds of restraints, and niyama means 5 kinds of observances. It takes a long time to just accomplish the first 2 steps, and then the third step comes almost automatically. I once met a very wonderful woman who had gone to a higher state of consciousness. She doesn't claim she has gone anywhere, but she told me her story. She was the wife of a Muslim civil servant in India, but she had been born a Hindu. She had a great love for the Hindu sannyasins and gurus. After her marriage, she expressed her desire to have a guru. Her husband was very broad-minded. He came to know of a certain man who was reputed to be a very good teacher. He went and invited him to his home, where he introduced him to his wife. The wife said, "Sir, I want to become a disciple. I heard you are a great yogi. Can you teach me?" He answered, "Yes, if you are sincere, I will teach you." "Can you teach me everything?" "I shall teach you everything I know." He gave her the first step, yama. When she understood that, he told her the second step, niyama, in a somewhat hurried fashion. This happened over the course of 2 months. Then he died. The woman felt she had been deceived. The Guru had told her he would teach her everything he knew, but he left her after only 2 months, right on the brink of yoga instruction. She used to sit alone and cry. Then one day he appeared to her in a vision, asking her why she was crying. "Because you deceived me. You told me you would teach me everything you know." He said, "Are you not talking to me now? I can still teach you. I didn't go anywhere. It's not imperative to have a body to teach." So she was satisfied. Then he said, "Why should I teach you the next step before you master the first two?" When I met her, it was 12 or 13 years after the incident. She said she was still going on with the first two steps, but she had a feeling the third step was coming to her automatically. The third step is sitting in a posture. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the asana or posture is described as Sukham Sthiram iti asana. When you can sit steadily and comfortably, you are in a state of asana. But in order to sit steadily and comfortably, your mind should have perfect rest. If needs come to your mind, you have to get up and go away to fulfill them. When the needs all drop away, there is no more physical pain or mental agitation. Then alone asana comes. Other steps still lie ahead, namely pranayama, the regulation of the vital forces through breath, pratyahara, withdrawal from sense interest, dharana, concentration, dhyana, meditation, and samadhi, merging with the Absolute. But these only come later. If you fail, it is not because there is no one to teach you, or the methods are inefficient, but because you have not prepared. When teachers come to a country like this, they are no longer in their own place. If they want to get back to their native country, they need to book passage. That costs money. While they are here, they need food, and that also costs money. They don't have a visa that allows them to work, so the money has to come from those who patronize them. Those patrons, if they want to have an occasional beer, and the teacher says, "Don't take beer," or an occasional chicken fry, and he says, "Don't eat meat," will look for the next guru who will agree to let them do it. There is a big competition in the field of gurus. The gurus soon learn how to make themselves acceptable to the local wants. I know I am almost a failure in the competitive world of the gurus. The disciples I have are the most down and out types who don't have fat checkbooks. At least that should make the quality of those who aspire through me better than the quality of the others. But there also I should say, iduvare naam oru vastuvinnarinni. Up till now we have not known anything. It's a very painful thing to have to say. Even the very first step in yoga, ahimsa, requires great discipline to be made a part of one's life. Ahimsa means not hurting, non-violence. Many people are capable of adopting a pacific attitude, which is superficially very goody-goody. That is not ahimsa. If you apply ahimsa to yourself, there are many weeds, parasites that live on your own spirit. They are all hurting you, draining the very sap of your spiritual life. In a lackadaisical atmosphere where you don't bother about them, they will thrive. And the same thing is also happening to other people. To see clearly the spirit of one and the spirit of another, and then to remove those parasites from a person's life, the methods we resort to may sometimes look harsh. It goes against the grain of our understanding of a passive life. The best example of non-violence or ahimsa I can think of is Christ. Mahatma Gandhi also accepted Christ as his model for non-violence. We see Christ going into the synagogue in Jerusalem and overturning the tables of the money changers, pulling out a whip and demanding they leave his father's temple. He calls people vipers and hypocrites, saying things to them like, "Ye are like whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men's bones and of all uncleanliness." Matthew 23-27. He uses words and even actions of a degree of violence, but their intention is to free people from demonic influences. Out of his compassion, he is trying to purge people of their defects. Christ also took upon himself the wrath of others, which was a thankless act. Sometimes in the Gurukula, when Nataraja Guru was correcting some of us, we would get very annoyed. He would say, "If the same treatment was given by a psychiatrist, you would have paid his bill. I am doing it without billing you. So you should at least be thankful to me. Instead, you are getting angry. It's a very thankless job." So the very first step is hard to understand and difficult to follow. How about the next four? Similarly, when you come to the niyama, the first one is cleanliness. It's hard to know exactly how to become clean. An American bathroom is practically the cleanest spot on earth. The toilets are well kept, but the people who use them cannot claim to be as clean in their minds. The concept of cleanliness, like that of non-violence, is a very difficult one with many ramifications. When can you say someone is clean? When nothing is misplaced, when your words are not misplaced, your thoughts are not misplaced, your spirit is not misplaced, your attitude is not misplaced, and your appreciation is not misplaced. Then you can say you are clean. Today's verse is a reminder to us that if we are serious, we should begin from scratch. One of the students in the PSU class I am giving handed in a paper the other day about the life she was experiencing growing up in America. It was very painful for me to read it. So much ugliness is there. Yet every day when I saw her in the class, she looked pleasant enough. We know well how to put on fronts while having all this garbage behind them. She could write only what she had experienced, and it is not her fault that her experience is such. She lives in a society, and she is trying to live as best she can, conforming to the prevailing pattern of behavior. I should say, though, it is the most rotten, most stinking model of society. How can she ever aspire to be clean in such a society? From these iron fortresses in which we are imprisoned, to make a breakthrough, that's the challenge. The sage Vamadeva said, there were hundreds of iron walls around him. Like a hawk, he could pierce through all of them and fly to his freedom. The higher consciousness we speak of, which alone can help us to wake up from the wakeful, comes through self-discipline. When you are disciplined, you become a disciple. People come to me and ask, "Can you take me as a disciple?" Are you willing to be disciplined? You have to prove your willingness by becoming disciplined. Nobody can make you a disciple. Only a disciple can make a disciple. They ask me, "Will you initiate me?" The first initiation has to come from you. It's not that first you are given an initiation and then you start. First you take the initiation, and when you reach a certain height, you will meet with your second initiation. Narayana Guru closes this verse saying that which is not affected by inner or outer things, by discipline or no discipline, is always the same. Until you wake up from the wakeful, you will not know this. There will always be these recurring dreams. like the king who dreamt all the twists and tortures of life, which will continue without ceasing. Things of the world, such as the office where you go to work, make a certain demand on you. If you are late, they mark you late. If you don't go, they won't pay you. And if you stay away, they will fire you. But when it comes to wisdom teaching, you think, after all, it is not as square and structured as my office. So what does it matter if I don't go one day? You don't give that kind of excuse at your workplace. Then you think, that man there who is the teacher, I don't pay him anything, so what does it matter? He is giving it gratis. If he were a man of worth, would he do that? He is a cheap fellow, and that is why he is giving that kind of teaching. So I can go whenever I feel like it. I can listen to the extent it pleases me. If it rains, I won't go. If you go to see even a police officer, you have to stand and wait until he is ready. But what about a teacher? He is not as superior as a police cop. I can just push open his door and walk in without knocking. It should all be to my convenience. I cannot have any inconvenience in my wisdom learning. If he wants to teach me, he should do it on my terms. There was a man full of itches called Raikva. He used to live under a cart. The great king Janashruti came to him to learn. He brought with him several gold chains, necklaces, pearls, horses, and a cart pulled by a mule, saying, "Hey Guru, I brought you all these presents. Teach me." Raikva told him, "Go away, you Shudra. You don't want Brahmavidya." But Janashruti was a wise and determined man. He went back and brought everything he had, including his only daughter. He said, "Master, I give you all this." Looking at the innocent face of the king's daughter, Raikva said, "The face makes me speak to you now." He called him a Shudra, one of the servile caste, but from that point he began to teach him. The point is, you have to give every last bit to get the teaching. And it's not what you pay or what you give, but the attitude you have. Do you want it to suit you, or are you going to suit yourself to the situation? You have to make a hard search on this question. The best is always inconvenient, so the next best is preferred. In the Ishavasya Upanishad, it says, as everything is enveloped by God, move free. But if you are not finding that convenient, the next best thing is to be a person bound to a situation in life and deciding to live 100 years doing your action without becoming attached to it. That's the next best. In Plato's Republic, the best of all possible states is described, but Socrates knew it wouldn't work because people were not prepared for it. He said, "This is the best. Even if it is not going to be lived by any people anywhere, I cannot say this is not the best." We cannot change a country, its culture, its traditions, or its heritage. If you are born there and have to live there, you probably have to look for what is suitable to that country. Of course, it won't bring about waking up from the wakeful. It only rearranges the wakeful itself a little more conveniently. I am telling you the truth. Accepting or not accepting it is up to you. Taking this into account, the Gita says that only 1 in 1,000 seekers is really serious about their search, and of those, only 1 in 1,000 finds truth. When spiritual life has to vie with Madison Avenue, competition for attention with lurid and exaggerated images, only Madison Avenue will win. This verse is a challenge to us. When Narayana Guru says we have not known anything, we should be able to say we have known. We have learned from our substantial efforts. For that to be possible, we should at least make a sincere attempt to raise our consciousness to another level. Such an effort cannot be made by someone else on our behalf. We have to do it for ourselves. You have to bring your life to a white heat. Even in material things such as splitting the atom or studying the depths of space, seekers have to make contrivances which look almost impossible, but they do it. And what do you gain by smashing an atom? If you want to know the least bit about a particle, an anu, you have to spend so much money and effort, keep a great vigil, and constantly refine and sharpen your tools. Then to know about the absolute, how much greater dedication should you have? How much more willingness should you have? How much more preparedness? On your keyboard, if you make a mistake, the next step is to consciously erase it. It won't go away if you just leave it alone. Then with decision, after effacing the error, you have to type in the right thing. In our life also, there has to be a reconsideration of each mistake, followed by its resolute correction, before we go on with great resolve. Let us hope we will have the courage to make a determination in our own minds to start fresh and become more conscious of what we are doing. And the free translation of verse 98 is, "It is evident that we do not know what this august reality is. Otherwise, how could we qualify every touch of pleasure as great happiness? The self is not the sum total of dependent originations. Even when the intellect and such faculties are undone, the self will remain unaffected as pure knowledge."